Hello and welcome. This is the abbreviated West Virginia University football podcast at earsports.com. I am Mike Casazza. This is a Paramount podcast, and we are gathered once again to talk about three topics relevant to WVU football as we step one stride closer to the end of the regular season, and who knows what else beyond that, because the fact of the matter is, whether you want to believe it or not, the Mountaineers still have a chance to get a top two spot in the standings and a reservation for the conference championship game in Dallas. Tried to talk about this before, got shouted down by the listeners and the commenters below, and all I was saying was, hey, it's still possible. Follow the rope for as long as it leads, and here you are, a team that, they're not going to win in Arizona. All right, well, they're not going to win in Cincinnati too. Well, now if you win your final three games and you get just a little bit of help above you, you have a chance to get into the top two and win some tiebreakers to earn that invitation to Jerry World in the championship game in the Big 12. Who would have thought that a couple of weeks ago, right? Here's what I'm going to tell you about the tiebreaker process. Very simple, okay? I know there's a whole lot of complications out there, fine print, processes, so on and so forth. Here's what I'll tell you, okay? Way too soon. Way too soon. Mountaineers has got to go 3-0, find their way up into second place, hope that Kansas State isn't there, and that a couple of other things happen in the conference so that the Mountaineers can win tiebreakers against Colorado and Iowa State. It's entirely possible, even though they don't play Colorado and lost to Iowa State. The simple thing is just go 3-0. It's not going to happen without three wins. It's not going to happen with Kansas State in the number 2 spot due to a head-to-head win over West Virginia and Colorado. So you can't control that. Just control the games, and that would begin against Baylor. And this is going to be trickier than you think for reasons we'll get to. West Virginia going to have a lot of good things going. Going to have to be better at home than it has been. Maybe as good as the team has played on the road, believe it or not, because this is a program that is 3-0 in the Big 12 for the first time ever. Ever. That is the reason why they're still in this race right now. And boy, how different things could be overall. They just taken care of one of the home games, never mind both of them, at night against ranked Iowa State and Kansas State in back-to-back weeks. But the schedule comes around, does another favor, back-to-back home games against Baylor and UCF. What has to happen? You got to get a break like that. You got to get a favorable schedule in November. That helps. Even though Baylor is coming off an open week and UCF is off this week and will be rested for next week, but that is another problem for another day. We're just going to talk about what has to happen when the two teams are on the field based on what we are talking about right now. A whole lot of conversation. And what does it all boil down to? It boils down to a podcast about the Mountaineers, 3 topics at the tip of our tongue as we proceed toward kickoff. The first topic today is W. That stands for welcome. So welcome back to West Virginia. As we said, on the road for a while. Arizona, an open week. Cincinnati, the team hasn't been at home since the loss to Kansas State nearly a month ago. Boos in that game, clamoring for change. And boy, have things changed. Nico Marchio, 2-0 as a starting quarterback. Again, the back-to-back road wins for the unprecedented start in conference road action. A new defensive coordinator. The vibes are good right now. What will the crowd be like? That'll be an interesting thing here because they had seemed like they were ready to cut the chute before and let this thing go. Not the case now. You figure the bandwagon is accommodating at this time of year when you have something to play for. And when it's November, the weather is getting a little bit crisper and the consequences are a bit more severe for the outcomes of games. People tend to lean in. Can West Virginia get a home field advantage? Can it play with the focus and the determination at home as it has on the road? That's a big question. That'll be a big deal in the outcome here. We also say welcome back to Jake Spavital, the former offensive coordinator at West Virginia, the former quarterback coach at West Virginia, the former graduate assistant at West Virginia. He will be the offensive coordinator for Baylor right now. A couple of years as the head coach at Texas State. He's in his first year in charge of Baylor's offense, and it wasn't especially pretty early on. It's been pretty good lately. We'll get to that in a minute, but he will be on the other sideline this time, and perhaps will be staring across the field at the quarterback, Garrett Green, who you might also welcome back as well, because that leads us to the V, which is vicarial. That's the substitute, the replacement, the backup quarterback, if you will. And who will be QB2 this week? Who will be QB1, of course. One answer is the answer for the other. Here's what we know. Garrett Green, almost nothing since banging his head off the turf against Kansas State a couple of weeks ago. did a little bit of throwing last week, did travel to the game, was in uniform, warming up, flipping the ball around during the game on the sideline with the baseball cap against Cincinnati, was available for an emergency, which I don't know. I guess that means if someone pulled the fire alarm and nobody else is left in the sideline, or perhaps if Markio and Ryder Burton and Khalil Wilkins all got hurt or ejected for targeting or drank bad Gatorade, then Green would go in. Nothing like that happened, of course. But if you travel, you can play, you've been cleared. So we know he's been cleared. And we know that what Neil Brown told us on Monday was that Garrett Green would begin to throw in 11 on 11 drills on Tuesday. And he needs to see a couple of things just to make sure the quarterback isn't rusty and is capable of going out there and playing well in a really important game for everybody involved right now. The other thing about this is, what do you have to see from Nico Marchio after a very efficient, very competent performance on the road against Arizona, followed by something very different against Cincinnati? Cincinnati is not an especially good defensive team, and Nico Marchio did not have an especially good game. 9 for 15, almost half of his yards coming on 2 throws on 3rd and long. One-on-one balls, they still count, but so do some of the miscues. So do some of the concerns that Neil Brown has about his fundamentals and his footwork and not seeing things quite as quickly and not feeling quite as confident as he had earlier. It's a defense that can give you trouble. It's that Iowa State look with the 3 down linemen, the 3 safeties, and dropping 8 and throwing people all around the passing windows. It can be difficult, but everybody's going to be difficult when you have a quarterback who can be affected like that. The problem with Markio is that you can't really tuck it and run. Maybe not as often or not as confidently as Garrett Green. And if Green is able to do that, that might open the head coach's eyes. Could he give you a second threat at the quarterback position? Markio can run more by design. You see more quarterback power with him than you would see a draw. You might see more of him rolling out to throw it than him rolling out to run it. We praised him for checkdowns and things like that when he got outside the pocket against Arizona. Opportunities weren't there in quite the same abundance against Cincinnati. Was that designed by that defense, or was that just the way they played and took those opportunities away? Probably a little bit of each. But what will Baylor do? Well, if you go back and look, I promise you, Garrett Green had a really good game against Baylor last year. Over 250 yards passing, over 100 yards rushing. The team did nearly lose, but he also threw the touchdown pass to Jaheim White out of the backfield to win the game. Has some experience against this defense. It'll be at home. He gives the element with his legs. If he's healthy and he can practice, does he show Neil Brown enough so he moves from the backup role to the QB1 again? But also, Nico Marchio is going to be involved here. And if he cleans up some of his miscues, if he can be a little bit more decisive and a little bit more accurate in practice and make Neil Brown go, you know what, I believe this guy is more like Arizona than he was against Cincinnati, he might be the guy against Baylor. Finally, the U stands for uh-oh, and that is what Jeff Coons brought up, the new defensive coordinator, when he spoke to us on Monday, and he pointed out the last defensive touchdown for West Virginia came following a score allowed by West Virginia. We've all been in this situation before if you've been watching the Mountaineers. Something bad happens, and then something else that's bad happens. Look at the Pitt game, right? And this is also a team that's given up scores and big plays in droves before, as recently as Arizona before the open week. And he noticed that Cincinnati scored. West Virginia went 3 and out. West Virginia's back on defense again. He says, I know what everybody's thinking. Uh-oh, here we go again. No, it's not uh-oh, here we go again. It's make a play, control the outcome, play defense. And they did. Pressure on the quarterback, forces a backward pass. The backward pass is a fumble, falls in front of Tyron Bradley, fumble return touchdown. You escape with a win. Kind of a new perspective for a team, and what Coons was most impressed about was the uniformity on defense. Everybody playing together, 11 people doing their jobs. And if you look at that, you had a defensive lineman, a linebacker, and a safety with double-digit tackles. They were running all over the field. They were making plays by themselves. They were making plays in a pack. It's unusual for a defensive lineman to get 13 tackles, never mind the nose guard. It's also unusual to see him doing that outside the hashes. It's unusual to see a linebacker running around the field like Josiah Trotter did and hitting as hard as he did, but also contagious because the safety behind him did the same. That's a good thing. But the uh-oh here is Baylor's offense because, Jake Spavital has something cooking. Folks, here are the rankings for Baylor's offense the past 3 games. Feel free to share these. Just give me credit because I came up with these numbers. No one else is capable of doing the research and finding these on their own. Past 3 games in the FBS, Baylor is number 1 in the country, points per game. Number 1 in the country, yards per game. Number 2 in the country, yards per play. Number 3 in the country in points per play. This is not Cincinnati's offense. This is not Arizona's offense. This is not Baylor's offense from 4 weeks ago. This is an offense that has been on a roll and just had a week to get ready for an opponent it had not seen play defense the way it did on Saturday, and an opponent that's going to have to do it again. Otherwise, the chase for that top spot in the conference is over. And then you see what happens from there for the rest of the season.